Thank you very much. It's great to be with you. And tonight my talk is called Find Your Home. And of course we all have homes. We all have a sense of home as well. Maybe it's for you, it's something, the place you grew up, the area you grew up, the home you grew up in. Maybe for you, your parents have moved and it's a little bit different. It's like, is that my home or is this my home? Is it where your parents now live? But home is also more a feeling than a place. It can be anywhere. You can be surrounded by lots of people or just with a few people or just with one person or on your own. It's a sense, a deep sense that you belong, that this is where you're meant to be, that you are known, all your good bits, all your not so good bits, and yet you are loved. And we all long, I think, for that sense of belonging. And it can be quite elusive at times. I was born and bred in the majestic town of Luton, which I'm very fond of, very proud of. And my school was known as the worst school in Luton, which is actually quite a difficult accolade to achieve. In my year, out of about 140 people, there were about 4 or 5 of us who went on to do further study, went on to do A-levels. And it was quite a dangerous place at times, my school. All the usual stuff you get in most schools, gang fights in the corridors, the time when someone stole a car on their way into school and then drove it in through the school gates, and for the whole of the morning was doing handbrake turns on the school field. It's quite a remarkable thing to witness. Before he lost control of the car and it kind of smashed into the maths block. And I remember thinking, you've just got to admire that reckless attempt to get expelled. I mean, there's nothing half-hearted about that at all. I don't even think they had the rules to prohibit what he was doing. I mean, obviously it was illegal, but they didn't have the rules to prohibit it. And so in that environment, it was actually quite dangerous to feel like you belong, because anything even mildly resembling a vulnerability, a weakness, had to be hidden, because if it came out, if it was on display, then it was likely to get stamped on. I mean, literally get stamped on. And so I didn't really feel like I belonged. I mean, I had enough going against me already. I actually enjoyed learning. I actually enjoyed studying things. I thought Shakespeare and Dickens were a good read. And that meant that our teachers liked me. And in our school, that was the kiss of death. So I didn't really feel like I could open up any more than that. And then when I came to Oxford, I came here to read law at St Anne's. I actually realized that people enjoyed studying here. It was okay to study here. You didn't have to hide that. And that was great. But I was the first person from my school to come here, and actually the last, because they knocked down my school. And I didn't really know what to expect. Everything was different. There was a whole new language. People talked about black tie and white tie, and I didn't really know what those words meant. And for the first few weeks, I actually felt like a bit of an outsider. And then I got to know a couple of mates, and they were really nice guys, and they were from actually much smarter backgrounds than me. But we got on, and I thought, oh, maybe it's going to be okay. And then one night, we're in the college bar in St Anne's, having a great time. And then they started talking about the fact that because of their schools or their families or something, for some reason, when they eventually moved to London, they were entitled to membership of this exclusive private members club. And I had never even heard of a private members club, let alone know someone who was a member of a private members club. It was like someone was talking about Narnia, this magical kingdom, which I didn't even know existed. And as they talked about it more, they obviously realized that I was kind of there, wide-eyed with wonder, like, what's this exciting thing? And so after a while, they turned and they said, oh, well, Steve, do you know what? What we can do is when we become members, then we can nominate you for membership, and then you can become a member of the private members club. I was so touched. I was blown away. I couldn't believe it. And I kind of stood there in St Anne's College Bar thinking, what was I worried about? I don't have to worry about belonging. I'm being accepted as one of these people. It's going to be absolutely fine. Silly old me for worrying. And then one of them went to get around in a bar, and the other one kind of looked at me, and he kind of tilted his head and leaned in. And he said, actually, Steve, I don't really want to get your hopes up. I don't think they'd ever accept someone from your background as a member. I tried to smile, but I was dying inside. I thought, I don't believe it. I didn't know what this thing was 10 minutes ago, and now I'm being denied membership because I'm too common. And so it can be quite difficult to feel that you really belong. And there's lots of reasons for that, because even if you are with people who are like you, and on the face of it, you should get on with, you should feel like you belong with, there's sometimes a fear that if they really knew us inside out, and not just the bits that we present and polish and show people, if they knew us completely, they actually wouldn't want to be around us. And so there are two ways that we can kind of respond to this desire for belonging, but also the realization that sometimes it's quite difficult to find. One is that you kind of go off. You just go off and you experiment and you do your own thing. And you try all sorts of different things. You rebel a bit and you try and find a different space, a different group, which maybe might accept you on your own terms. But the other thing people try and do is just to try and conform, to kind of force yourself to be part of that group, to just work out what it is that helps you fit in and to pretend and hide anything else that you're ashamed of, anything else that you think might not fit. But neither of those actually works in the long run. What we need is somewhere we can really belong. Somewhere where you're completely known and yet you're completely loved. We need to find a true home. And Jesus tells a story which is exactly on that point. And it's on your tables. You've got a copy of Luke's Gospel. It's in Luke's Gospel at Luke 15, which is on page 106 if you want to follow it. It's slightly longer than the story we looked at yesterday. So you might want to grab those if you've got them. And it's just after the story of the lost sheep we looked at last night. And as I said last night, Jesus tells these stories. Jesus tells these stories in a particular context. And you see that at the start of Luke 15. It says that the tax collectors, the collaborators with the Roman Empire's people who were despised, and the sinners, those whose lives were apparently obviously immoral in some way, those were the people who gathered round to hear Jesus. Those are the people who are gathering around. There's something about what he's saying, something about what he's doing, something about the way he is living that is absolutely captivating for them, and they draw close. Those are the people who draw close. That might be a surprise to you if you haven't heard much about Jesus. And the religious leaders, the supposedly moral people, are offended by this. They're upset by this, and they start mumbling. And they say, this man welcomes sinners, and he even eats with them. And it's to those people that Jesus tells this story in Luke 15. And it starts at verse 11. Jesus continued, there was a man who had 2 sons. The younger one said to his father, Father, give me my share of the estate. So he divided his property between them. Not long after that, I went to the cash point and I put my card in, tapped in my number, and the cash machine made a noise I'd never heard before, which was beep, 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 beep. And I thought, I must have got my number wrong. So I put it back in again, and it went, boop, 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 boop. And at this point, she's kind of leaning over, going, "Is everything all right?" And I was like, "Yes, it's fine, don't worry at all." And then I suddenly realized that I'd managed to spend my entire student loan in 4 weeks. That's quite a difficult thing to do. And I was on a first date with a girl I really liked, and I had no money on me and no money in my bank account. That's not a good place to be. And so I was walking down Broad Street, actually, and I just suddenly thought, we'll phone a friend. And so as I was walking down the road, I managed to kind of reach into my pocket, and I could only type out 6 words in a text. And I just said, "First date, Broad Street, need cash," to my best friend. And I got Beth into the Turf Tavern, ran out back onto Broad Street. And if you were in Oxford that night, you would have seen quite a strange sight. You would have seen me run out onto the road, panicked, and you would have seen a man sweating and cycling as fast as he possibly could. And he'd actually been in bed at the time. I mean, it was 7 p.m., which is, I guess, the usual time for students to be asleep. So you would have seen this guy, my friend Phil, racing down the road on his bike, in his pajamas, towards me, and just shove a bundle of cash in my hand and then go off again. I mean, we didn't even speak. It was like a drug deal. And then I went back in. And I'm delighted to say, 16 years later, that it was a successful first date, because Beth is now my wife. But it was a wake-up call. I needed a wake-up call. I was spending everything I had, all my money, all the bank's money, on just expensive living, just wasting it. And actually, there was things I did in that time that even now I deeply regret. There were mistakes I made. There were sins which are still painful to remember, actually. And what was driving it? I thought I was rebelling, but actually what was driving it was a desire to belong. And the younger son comes to his senses. He literally, it says, comes to himself. And he's wasted everything, and he thinks of a plan. He needs to get some food. He needs to get some money. So he goes back and thinks, "I go back, I'll persuade my father to give me a job." And he's not really focusing at this point on fixing the relationship. He's just focusing on, I need some food, and I need somewhere to live. So he prepares a little speech. I don't know if you've ever done that with your family. You think, I'm going to prepare a little speech which is designed to get exactly what I need from my parents. We learn it from quite a young age. And maybe he's hoping, he might eventually work his way back into the family. But at this stage, he's focused on just, basically saying, "Give me a job." But then this extraordinary thing happens. And it is an extraordinary thing. He goes back, but while he's still a long way off, his father sees him and is filled with compassion for him. And he runs to him. I don't know if that surprises you. What would you do if you were the father and you saw the son who's so grievously offended you, rebelled against you, rejected you, coming back? Would you throw things at him? Would you stand there with your arms folded, give him the silent treatment for 2 months? Would you wait to see whether he'd brought a gift and had a pretty good explanation for what went wrong? Would you berate him with a list of his faults and errors? The father, when he sees him a long way off, runs to him. And there's a number of things going on there. I mean, it's actually remarkable that he runs, not just because of the relationship, but also because in that culture, men would wear long robes, and it would be shameful to ever show your legs. And to run to someone, you would actually have to hitch up your robe and display your legs, show your legs. It was shameful for a patriarch of a family to run in that way. But he runs to him. And another factor is when the son had rejected the father, it wasn't just scholars who work in this region say it's not just that the father bore the shame of that, but the whole community would. And the whole community vengeance was a real thing then. And there's a risk that if the son comes back into the village without the relationship with the father being restored, then the son will be attacked. Because he loves him, because he wants to embrace him, because he still wants to protect him, the father bears the shame of running to him. And when he gets to him, he throws his arms around him and embraces him. takes the risk, bears the cost of restoring the relationship. And he runs to him while he's still far off. I wonder what you might think you'd have to do before God would welcome you home. What hoops you'd have to jump through. Whether he'd stand there turning his face away, or the second you take a step, would run to meet you. And actually, the son is so moved by this. It seems that he tries to start his little speech, but the speech changes. And all he can say is, I've sinned against heaven and against you. I'm not worthy to be called your son. That's all he can say. And the father runs in and says, restores the relationship, puts his best robe on him, covers him, gives him a ring, a sign of his sonship, and then celebrates, throws a massive celebration for him. When you in the Middle East, when you celebrate with a fatted calf, they're so expensive and they go so far that basically the only way you would do that if you had something huge to celebrate. And what you would do is you would invite everyone in the village, everyone in the community to celebrate, because it would be such a special thing. It would be unheard of to throw a celebration with a fatted calf and not invite everyone near you. And the father wants the whole village, everyone, to see that the son is restored and to share in the celebration. Why? Because this son of mine was dead and is alive again. He was lost and is found. The relationship which was broken is restored. And you might be here tonight. You might, like me, have longed to belong. You might have, because of that, driven yourself to experience everything, to go your own way, maybe even over the last couple of terms. And I wonder if you found, like I did, that while everyone else might look at you and just think you've got it all together, you're the life and soul of the party, you're having a great time, deep down, there's a sadness in you. Because even though you're experimenting with all these things, you're starting to realize they're never going to satisfy you. It's almost like diminishing returns. The further you go, the more you try, the less comes back. And I know exactly how that feels. I thought I needed independence so I could get satisfaction, but then I realized that my independence, the more I tried to find satisfaction, the more it depleted my satisfaction. What I was longing for was the deep satisfaction of knowing that I was completely known and yet completely loved. And on the cross, Jesus bore the cost to enable that to be the case, that relationship to be restored, so you could be welcomed home, so that the second you take a step towards God, he runs and meets you. And there might be an opportunity for you to respond to that in a moment. But there's also an elder son in this story, which hopefully you picked up on. And he's been there throughout. But he hasn't said anything, which in itself is surprising, because in that culture, the older son would be expected to be the peacemaker. He would be expected to jump in when the younger son kicked off against the father, but he didn't. It's interesting why he didn't do that. And so he asks the servant at this point, he says, what's going on? And the servant says, your brother has come and your father has killed the fatted calf because he has him back safe and sound. And the elder brother is angry at this and refuses to go in. I mean, this isn't like staying away from your college spot because you don't like the music and you think the theme is rubbish. It's a little bit different from that. If your family, if your father throws a party for the whole village, for the whole community, and you don't join in, you're humiliating your father and you're causing a huge amount of shame. You're making that relational fallout really obvious for everyone. It's hugely disrespectful. But again, the really surprising thing is that the father goes out to the elder son, makes himself vulnerable again, and pleads with his son to go in. And the elder son answers, look, he doesn't even address him as father. He just says, look, all these years I've been slaving for you, and I've never disobeyed your orders. I wonder if you've ever said that to a father. It's quite a strange way to speak. I've been slaving for you. I've never disobeyed your orders. It doesn't speak of a loving relationship. It speaks of joyless service and resentment. It's really interesting. And then it's clear he's angry and bitter because he says, you've never even given me a young goat to celebrate with my friends. You think, wait a minute. I don't know if you've ever had an argument. I don't know if you've ever had an argument. But I imagine you've had one or two. You don't look like you could, but I'm sure you could have. Sometimes when you're really angry in an argument, without even realizing it, you say things that aren't true. Has anyone ever done that? Like you just say things that are not true, but you're so angry you say them. So he says, you never even gave me a young goat. And you think, well, wait a minute. What did the father do at the start of the story? He took his property and he divided it between them. Between them. Between the elder son and the younger son. The elder son got everything. He got the lot. He got everything he could ever expect to be entitled to, and he got it early at the same time as the younger son. All he could wish for, he's already got it all. And he says, this son of yours, he can't even describe him as his brother, this son of yours who squandered his property with prostitutes. You think, like, what now? How does he know? Was he there? Because it doesn't say that in the story. It says that he went and spent it on expensive living, on wild living. He doesn't say he was with prostitutes. He's so angry, he's so sure of his own rightness that he's just lashing out at all those around him. See, the elder brother, in his eyes, has done everything right. He's lived a moral life. He's done what's expected of him. He's worked hard. He's achieved. He's delivered. He's kept up his half of the bargain in his eyes, but he's blind to how he actually feels towards his own father. He doesn't realize what's going on. He's kind of conforming to what he thinks are the expectations without ever understanding the Father's love for him. And if you try and hide your resentment and your shame and just try and conform in that way, it will always spill out somewhere at some stage, normally in a row. And what's sad is that the Father isn't a taskmaster who wants a perfect servant. His love is not conditional on perfect performance. That might be a surprise for you tonight. Maybe that's how you related to your own parents, or maybe that's how you thought you should relate to God. I've performed perfectly, I've performed brilliantly, now show me some love. Maybe it was that kind of sense, that feeling that led you to walk away from your faith a few years ago, or even a year ago, or a few months ago. Maybe it's that sense which made you resentful to the church and to Christians and even to God. But the Father wants relationship with his children. And it's amazing. In spite of the elder son's outburst, the Father pleads again, my son. He wants to restore the relationship. My son, you're always with me, and everything I have is yours. But we had to celebrate and be glad because this brother of yours was dead and is alive again. He was lost and is found. The Father wants to do everything he can to leave the door open so that the elder son can come in to the party and celebrate, so that the relationship can be restored. And what's fascinating is that the story ends on a cliffhanger. We don't find out how the elder son responds. And most people who read this story in the kind of Middle Eastern culture in which Jesus told it say there are two possibilities, two ways this story can end. Firstly, the elder son embraces the Father, accepts his love, comes into the party. But the second way is that the elder son is so angry even at the Father's generosity that he strikes him. He attacks him. And in his anger, he rejects him. Jesus told this story to the religious leaders of his time, and we know that Jesus himself was struck. was crucified by those he came to save, was punished, bore our sins in his body on the tree, on the cross, took my sin, my shame, so I could know, so I could belong with God, be at home with God. That because of Jesus, there's someone who knows me completely. All the things I've done wrong, all my sins, all my mistakes I've made, and knows all my shame, all the things I've tried to hide. When I've tried to conform, he knows both those things. All the things I regret, all the things I'm ashamed of, and knows me completely to the bottom of my soul, and yet loves me to the sky. And when I trusted that, I just had the greatest sense of belonging I've ever felt in my life. I realized that I'd found my home with Jesus. And I wonder for you, how do you respond to that tonight? It might be you're here and you're thinking, well, my friend said it was going to be interesting. Actually, that wasn't that interesting. I didn't really want to know that. Thank you very much. Or maybe you don't even think thank you very much. That's okay. Thank you very much for listening and sitting there. Might be that you've been lured here under false pretenses. You're on your way to Park End, and somehow your friend managed to coax you in here on the way. And I'm so sorry. You might feel shortchanged by the whole experience. And if that's the case, is George here? George, can you just stand up, come over? George is responsible for this whole thing. George, just come forward. And if you feel shortchanged, George would love to compensate you. He doesn't have any cash. It's a little-known secret about George, but he does have an amazing ability to compose poetry on the spot. So if you feel shortchanged, George would count it an honor and a privilege to just compose a sonnet for you. And you can take that with you to Park End. But even if you do feel that way, can I just encourage you, on Monday nights in Starbucks upstairs with free drinks and cake, there's something called The Search. And that is the most fantastic opportunity to bring your questions, bring your doubts, bring your things you don't agree with, and just chat about them in a really relaxed setting. And whether you're an atheist or agnostic, whether you just really like George, whatever the reason is, I would just encourage you to come to that. It might be you're here tonight and you think, actually, that is interesting. I want to talk a bit more about that. And we'd love to invite you, grab a coffee with the person you came here with, one of the team here, and just tell them what you think. Discuss it with them. Ask your questions. Let them know how you feel about it all. But I think there might be two other groups of people here tonight. The first, you might be here and actually you really relate to the younger son. You've been experimenting, you've been going your own way, and you didn't expect to, as you came in tonight, you didn't expect to feel this way, but actually you've realized that's what's been going on. And actually you realize it's quite tiring. You're quite weary, because it's hard when nothing seems to fit. And you deeply long to know that feeling. To take that first step towards God, and to know that feeling of him running to embrace you, that you could be completely known and completely loved. And you might want to take that risk tonight. Take that first step towards God. Place your trust in Jesus. And you might be here also, and you've been trying to conform for a while, to belong, to fit in, meet people's expectations, working hard, trying to do all the right things. And actually you realize now that in a funny way, without even realizing it, you've wandered off. On the outside, you're doing all the right things. But on the inside, your heart's just growing cold, and you're not sure there's anything of a relationship left there at all. But what you need is a new relationship with the one who made you. Not a relationship that you can earn, but one that's offered to you because he loves you. So maybe we could all just close our eyes, because I think it might be a private moment for those two groups of people. And whether you're here and you want to take that first step towards God tonight, you want to place your trust in Jesus, or you want to renew that love you had at first, because you know it's growing cold and you've been doing all sorts of things. But you want to restore that relationship. I'm going to pray a very simple prayer, and I just invite you to pray it along with me. I'm going to say sorry, thank you, and please. So, Lord, I'm sorry for the things I've done wrong. Maybe if a particular thing comes to mind, you just want to, in the quietness of your heart, say sorry for that particular thing. I'm sorry for going my own way. I'm sorry for turning from you, and I turn back to you now. Thank you for Jesus. Thank you for his death for me. Thank you that he bore my sin, bore my shame, so that I could be completely known and completely loved by God. And please, would you come into my life by your Spirit tonight? I want to know your love. Amen. And then if we could just keep our eyes closed and just, what I'd really love, and I think it would be really helpful for you, because sometimes we pray these prayers and tomorrow afternoon you might be off playing football or drinking a coffee in Starbucks, and you might start second guessing yourself, saying, was I really thinking about something else? It's a way almost of underlining it for you. And no one else will see. Everyone else has got their eyes closed, but I will see. And I just invite you, if you prayed that prayer for the first time tonight, or in a way that was significant for you tonight, could I just invite you, just quietly where you are, while everyone's got their eyes closed, just to gently raise your hand, and then I will see it and I'll acknowledge it. Is that okay? So when you're ready, if you prayed that prayer tonight for the first time, or in a way that was significant for you, could you just raise your hand? Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. Thank you, thank you.